Good evening, everyone. I do apologise for the lateness. I'm going to have to say it's a technical fault down to me. So there we go. In the questions, can people see me or you? Good. Hooray! Right, we got there in the end. Thank you very much. Um, for those of you who have joined the call and wanted to see Nick, I do apologise, but Nick's not feeling very well, so he's asked me to stand in at last minute, which is probably down caused a technical issue, which is just called Mike. So I do apologise. Basically, my name is Mike Hannam. I'm part of the water safety team at the RNLI, and one of my primary roles is to teach the volunteers to give messaging and understand hazards and risks involved around our water sports and our water activity. Nick's asked me tonight to talk about cold water shock and probably leading on to the wearing of life jackets. So, if everyone's happy, we'll make a start. I say, if you've got any questions, then I can now see them on the left-hand side. So please do ask. When we talk about cold water shock, I teach it under the title of hazards of immersion. So what happens when we enter water involuntary? What happens to the body? So first of all, you've probably all heard the term cold water shock. Now, what is cold water? Well, cold water is deemed as 15 degrees, and that is considered cold. Around the UK and Ireland, our average temperature of a year is 12 degrees C. Obviously, when it gets to September, October, the water's a little bit warmer, but on average, it's average of 12 degrees C. And yeah, this gets colder in the winter, and also fresh water is subject to more temperature variation than perhaps the sea water is. When we're talking about immersion, usually we talk about 4 stages of immersion. Now, the initial one is sort of 3 to 5 minutes, so that's the initial responses that the body's likely to make when immersed into cold water. And secondly, the short-term responses, so a little bit further on, 5 to 30 minutes, and carrying on. Then we go on to long-term response, 30 minutes plus, and then we talk about post-immersion response of the body. Now, I think we're just going to concentrate on probably the first initial responses and talk about cold water shock, and then have a look at some of the short-term responses. Okay, so stage 1, during sudden immersion in cold water, 2 automatic responses by the body happen, and you can't stop them happening. They're going to happen. One is the cold shock response, which we call cold water shock. And the second, I don't know if we've got any divers on the call, but is the diving response, which lots of divers are familiar with, and it's another automatic thing that happens. Talking about the cold water shock or the cold shock response, I went onto a website and it was from Canadian open water swimmers. And basically it says, short of being hit by a bus or struck by lightning, cold shock is the biggest jolt that your body can experience. Now, having suffered cold water shock and jumped into a Welsh river whilst doing fast water rescue stuff, I can back that up. It really is a shock. So what's it going to do? What this cold shock is going to do is 3 threats, basically. 1, loss of breathing control. 2, heart and blood pressure. And 3, mental problems associated with being sort of dunked in cold water. So basically, first, let's have a look at the breathing control. What's it going to do? Gasping. Now, I know when I went into the water there, my initial response was one big gulp of breath. So it was like a and that is the stage when the first mouthful of water gets ingested and taken in. The second one is hyperventilating. So this sort of panting business, this trying to get your breath. and the body's requiring more oxygen, and that leads to difficulty in holding your breath. So anyone who sort of usually goes into a swimming pool 28, 30 degrees and could hold their breath for a long time, I would put a week's salary that they can't do it in cold water, having just been dumped in. And this leads to, because of the lack of oxygen, lack of air going in, a feeling of suffocation. So that's the breathing control goes out the window, and we're trying to gasp for breath. Secondly, heart and blood pressure. Well, the blood vessels constrict because of cold water, and it causes a massive increase in heart rate and also blood pressure, which we've got no control over at all. So couple that together with, if you've got existing blood pressure problems, existing heart problems, we all know where that's going to end up going. Okay, so let's have a look at the mental problems. You imagine if you fall off your boat, middle of the night, dark, all the rest of it, and I don't have to describe it in full detail, but what we're going to get, disorientation. We're not going to know where we are. We're going to think, no minute, what's going on? Secondly, panic. Yeah, we're going to go into a little bit of panic and sort of try to self-rescue and do all the rest, try to swim. We also get the inability to think clearly. Yeah, I think we're only concentrating on one thing, and that's survival. So the ability to think clearly goes. Inability to evaluate the problem. So we've been dumped in the water. Do we really realise that it's a problem over our paddock? That's one thing. Inability to carry out a plan of action. Now, I put in brackets the ability to activate a manual life jacket. So if you're dumped in the water and you've not got an automatic life jacket on, would you be able to find the toggle? Would you be able to pull that toggle and locate it if all these things are going on in your life? Freezing of actions. Yeah, once we've had the initial panic, we're like rabbit in the headlights. Failure to act. So all the things we carefully planned, we planned how we're going to get back to our boat, we planned how we're going to recover ourselves onto the boat, but I would say that those actions are going to failure to act on that part. And this would lead on to sort of a feeling of helplessness. Lethargy, yeah, okay, you've been in the water a little time. And I don't know, for those of you who've sort of been below your boat in under 5 degrees C of water temperature, a pain. Now, it usually hits the head and you get massive pains in your head and a headache, uncontrollable stuff. Okay, so what can we do to prevent cold water shock, cold shock protection? First of all, obvious, don't go into the water, which is the first point. If you can, you enter the water slowly. You see it every Boxing Day when people who are raising funds for the RNLI go into the water. It's a tentative move in and a gradual reduction in body temperature. Don't swim immediately. Now, I don't know those people who have actually seen our Float to Live campaign. It says lay there, float, get your thoughts together. They say up to 90 seconds, just lay there and float, and then think about what you're going to do. So that's part of the float messaging. And obviously, wearing protective equipment, clothing would assist in that. But we all know that if you don't need to go in the water and it's a nice hot day outside of the water, you're not going to wear the clothes to protect you going into the cold water. So, that's one. And when we're talking about sailing, motorboating, and other activities, we really promote wearing an auto-inflating life jacket. What does that do? When the life jacket inflates, it immediately makes you feel at comfort. You don't have to panic. You don't have to sort of struggle to swim because the life jacket's going to do it all for you. Okay, so that's the initial cold water shock side of it. As I said again, the second part of those automatic things that are going to happen is the diving response. What is diving response? Well, it's sort of, with all mammals, they have this, some to a greater degree than the others. It's the reason why dolphins can hold their breath for so long, seals can hold their breath for so long, and also younger people. It is an automatic response on immersion in water. To a lesser extent with humans, and you will find children have got a better response in the diving response, but slowly as they get older, that sort of lessens. So what does that do? It is a response to immersion. It decreases the heart rate. So let's think back to our cold water shock. That increases the heart rate. The diving response lowers it. It reduces the buildup of carbon dioxide in the body. It reduces the blood flow to the extremities and allows more oxygenated blood to the core organs and especially to the heart and brain. And it requires less breathing to take in the oxygen. Now, for those of you who've sort of thought, well, these are two different things. Yes, they are. And the body suffers what we call autonomic conflict. So you've got cold water shock saying, pump harder, heart, get more oxygen out there, increase the blood pressure, all the rest of it. And all of a sudden, you've got a contrary response in the diving response, which says, okay, heart, slow down, don't need so much oxygen, helps us hold our breath and all the rest of it. You know, I just compare it to when a baby's very young and you take them swimming, who tells them to hold their breath when they go into the water? It's an automatic thing. So that is autonomic conflict. If we compare the two, okay, cold water response, increased breathing. Diving response, reduced oxygen. Cold water response, increase in heart rate. Diving response, heart rate decreases. Cold water response, blood pressure increases. And then in the diving response, the body says, well, I don't quite need so much oxygen. So what does that do? It causes utter confusion in the body. And for those who've got any sort of medical problems, it's likely to lead to heart problems. And that is quite common. I will say in days gone by, you know, did everyone die of drowning on the Titanic? I would hazard a guess, no. They're in music, they're in the ballrooms, all the rest of it, and all of a sudden they're immersed into cold water. Now, I would suggest that a lot of those suffered from cold water shock, autonomic conflict, and that left them to perish. Not a very nice subject, I know, but you know, it's fact, and it backs up why we say, please wear an automatic inflating life jacket when it's suitable for the activity you're doing. You know, I'm not saying a kayaker should wear an automatic life jacket because they expect at some time to go in the water. Dinghy sailors, exactly the same. You know, we would suggest something that they could swim in and all the rest. I'm forever hearing people say, well, I don't need to wear a life jacket because I'm a good swimmer. Okay, we've already heard what cold water shock can do. And would you be a good swimmer at that point? I suggest no. And moving on into the shorter term responses, you know, the sort of 3 to 30-minute aspect, what's going to happen? You're going to lose your ability to self-rescue. You're going to lose your ability to think straight and also do all those things. Again, what does a life jacket do? It comforts you. It keeps you afloat. If you're unconscious, it'll turn you the right way up. And so, you know, it's got the benefits. So just in summary of that part of it, we say wear a life jacket with crotch straps and a spray hood. Wear additional insulation when you're on your boat. And again, if you're unable to get out of the water, minimise your movement. Try and keep your head out of the water. and only use legs if essential, because moving on, if you start doing a lot of stuff further on into the immersion, then you're going to lose heat from your body. Okay, so why wear a life jacket? Just again in summary, it vastly improves your chance of surviving the initial effects of cold water shock. It's a comforter, it keeps you afloat. It supports you even when unconscious. Okay, so what does that do? It doubles the survival time that you are going to do. So what does that do? It lengthens the opportunity of a lifeboat coming to pick you up and lengthens the opportunity of being rescued. Fourthly, it increases your visibility. So once a life jacket is inflated, it's nice big, it's yellow, it's got reflective tape, so you're more visible to those that come searching for you. That, coupled up with a means of calling for help on your person, should hopefully lead to a successful rescue. Okay, that's a very quick overview of cold water shock and some reasons for wearing a life jacket when you're out on your boat. Is there any questions, or do you have any questions at that point? Anything you'd like cleared up? Okie doke. Silence is acceptance. Is there anything else about water safety or the RNLI I could perhaps help you with before we conclude it? I wasn't going to touch on 3 and 4, but if you'd like me to touch on 3 and 4, I'm quite happy to. Unfortunately, being new to sort of Facebook Live, I would have liked to share the screen and show you a graph. But basically, stage 3 is the longer term responses, and what it does show is the fact that from immersion, the time of useful consciousness when you're able to do something is about a third of the time that you're in the water. Depending on the sort of core body temperature and how that comes down, about a third you're able to actually do something. So that's your calling for help, that's your sort of swimming back to the boat and all the rest. What it does show, another third of the time, you are conscious and you could still perhaps be rescued. It's only at the very last stages that you're at risk of death. And I back that up by saying if you're wearing a fully fitted automatic life jacket that's going to keep you afloat. So that really opens up the window of opportunity for being rescued had the call for help been put out. So that's stage 3 really. Stage 4 is like the post immersion. So what happens once you've been rescued? Okay, we've got a thing called post rescue collapse. Obviously, if you've been immersed, then you lack oxygen. Removal from the water is quite a critical stage, and if a person's been in the water for a long time, they get a thing called hydrostatic squeeze. Now, what hydrostatic squeeze does is the pressure of the water pushes all the blood to the vital organs, and that's where it is. If you suddenly lift a person out that's been immersed in water for a long time, then all the blood is likely to go away from the vital organs, and that's when you get a problem. I know certainly in helicopters, things like that, on lifeboats, we like to do what we call a horizontal lift. So there's less of that effect of all the blood rushing away and going to your feet and moving away from the vital organs. Obviously, there's hypothermia is likely to set in after a good period of time and the problems associated with hypothermia. Also, post-rescue collapse caused by physical exertion, trying to rescue yourself, trying to climb up the side of a boat. You're going to be very, very tired. And then finally, what we call as secondary drowning. Now, if you take a mouthful of water, then it's likely to go into the lungs and it's going to start irritating the lungs. Whilst you don't actually drown on that water that you've ingested or inhaled, then what does happen is the lungs produce a fluid called edema, and this actually causes a secondary drowning. And it can occur up to 72 hours after that immersion. Now, a very good example of that is about 3 years ago. There was a kayaker, went to the Lake District, crashed his car on the way home, and the cause of death was put down to secondary drowning. So the build-up of this edema over the time, it got out of the water and felt perfectly fine. But that sudden build-up in the lungs, or the gradual build-up in the lungs, sorry, of this fluid caused secondary drowning. So it is really important, if you've swallowed some water, then to get checked out. And what do? They keep you under observation for a long, long time. Probably overnight, just to make sure that the lungs aren't producing this edema and you get a build-up causing secondary drowning. Really important. We all get embarrassed because we've fallen in, but if we take any water, please, please, please get checked out. Okay, so that is the fourth stage, and to be quite honest, the rescue phase is as hazardous as the rest of the problems. Okay, so where can people get more info? If you've got the time, we've got lots of useful information, and I don't know if we've got a way, and I can put it on the site later, of the URL of rnli.org/safety. I'll put that on, or get someone to put it on the site later. Okay, Jonathan, Secretary Hannam, my understanding is that can happen. Both freshwater as well as salt. Yeah, to a lesser extent in freshwater, the salt water does cause more irritation, but yes, you're exactly right. It does irritate the lungs, and the lungs produces edema, just to sort of get rid of the irritant, if you like. Okay, if there's no more questions, I will get that URL put on the Imray website. Please, please, please visit it. And there's a lot of useful information depending on what activity you're involved in. And there's also a link to some of the resources that we can provide for you. A lot are downloadable. There's a lot of good videos. Say the cold water shock one. Please go on to the Respect the Water site, where you'll find things about cold water shock, the Float to Live campaign, and also the Breathe. It's a very good video about not being able to breathe once you're immersed in cold water. Okie doke. Well, thank you very much. And again, I do apologise for the technical issues to start with. When, yeah, guilty, down to me, and user error. Thank you very much.